Welcome to our Lunch and Learn today on July 8th for Mental Health America of Spartanburg County. We have Evan Thomas with us today. I'm so excited to hear from him, and I'm going to turn it over to him in just a minute. I just want to make a couple of quick announcements. In terms of your continuing education, if you are interested in getting that credit, you will get an email likely tomorrow. If not Friday, you'll get it Monday, and it will have all the specific information about who you need to contact at corporate education at Spartanburg Regional for that. So make sure that you look for that. That will also have the link to the recording of today's Lunch and Learn so that you can watch that again or send it to share with someone that you're interested in giving that information to. So please look for that email that will be coming from Zoom, and it will have all that information in it. I will also, as usual, be posting in the chat a couple of resource links, mostly just our information at MHA, but then I will also be posting a document link that Dr. Thomas has given to us that has several resources and links for you to check out more information. And so you look for that. That's a Google Drive document, so you can download it and have it for later to access. So the other thing I want to just mention is today, Dr. Thomas would really like to have more interaction. There he is. And so we're going to use the Q&A. So if you look at the bottom of your screen where you normally would see the chat, and of course you can still use the chat if you have something particular you want to share. But what we'd like for you to do is focus on using the Q&A if you have a specific question for Dr. Thomas related to his presentation. And so he will be checking that and answering those live as we go throughout the presentation. If you want your information shared, make sure that you put that in the question so that we know it's okay to share who had the question. Otherwise, it'll just be an anonymous question shared with everyone. So, well, we don't want to take too much time. I want to give the rest of the time to Dr. Thomas. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to give a little bit more introduction of himself. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Awesome. You're welcome. Can you hear me all right? Am I coming in? All
Yes.
right. Perfect. Hey, y'all. I am Dr. Thomas. So I run a small private practice here in Greenville, South Carolina, where I mainly focus on working with queer clients. And I am also the program director and department chair of the Marriage and Family Therapy program at Converse University. We are Converse University as of July 1st, so very exciting stuff happening. And I've been in the upstate 2 years now. Most of that has been COVID, but it's been fun so far. So yeah, let me share my screen and pull up the PowerPoint, and we will kind of work through this. And as Maggie said, I really would like for this to be more of interactive Q&A. I will keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A section. When I think of giving a presentation or giving a training on how to work with a specific community, specifically queer communities, to me, it makes more sense to kind of hold more of a conversational space and allow for those participating to bring questions that maybe they don't feel comfortable asking other peers, or questions that come up during session with clients that fall into this category. So I see that as my role today, is to be more of a peer consult for this community specifically. All right. And Maggie, it's not letting me share my screen to PowerPoint. I don't know if you can work any magic. to allow that to happen.
It should let you now. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Stop. All right. All right. Is the PowerPoint showing?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. All right. Technology is working with us so far.
Yay.
So a little bit about me. I like to give information about myself and how I was selected to give this presentation today. So the biggest thing is, yes, I do identify personally as queer, and I use the term queer because it is an inclusive. So queer basically means you identify as queer if you identify as anything other than completely 100% straight. So that is why I use that term. There's also the LGBTQ um, QIA that is also used as well. But I just like to use queer. It rolls off the tongue easier, and it's just my preference. I know that this term can be triggering for the older generation where this term used to be used in a harmful way. So I check in with people as I use this term to just make sure that they're comfortable with me using it as well. So personally, I identify as queer, but I don't represent, all queer voices. If you haven't noticed or if you can't see my screen, I am still a white man, so I have those privileges and that power. I have the privilege of being able to what we call kind of code switching. I can be mistaken as straight, where some people in the queer community don't have that privilege. So I do have those privileges. So I don't want y'all to think that I'm representing the queer community as a whole. As I said before, I have a private practice. I focus on queer couples, substance use, as well as maintaining the program director role at Converse University. Have many years of experience of running LGBTQIA groups in Chicago and in Appalachia, Virginia. So the biggest thing that I think is important when working with any underrepresented population is kind of that self-work, the therapist work. And with that, I want to pose some questions for y'all, and this allows me to kind of guide my presentation today. But what are your understandings of this specific community? What barriers do you might have, and what questions do you have that I could help answer throughout this lunch and learn? I think I can select the Q&A. So I have the chat up, but feel free to add your questions in the Q&A, and that will help me with this presentation. All right. Maggie, I'm not able to see the Q&A. Let me see if this, here we go, but that actually, okay, cool. Resources in the area, cool. Okay, so awesome, questions are coming in. So the biggest thing, and these are the themes that will come up when working with this community, and this will kind of help answer some of these questions, is um, the lack of family support. The biggest thing to know about the queer community is that family doesn't necessarily mean or represent family of origin. A lot of members of this community have been cut off by their family members, especially in the deep South, Southern culture area. And so when you talk about family, ask clarifying questions of who do you identify as part of your family, who is part of your support system. You can do this by doing a genogram, which is phenomenal. And I like to do this with all of my clients, but specifically queer clients, of saying, hey, we're going to kind of map out your support system. Who are the people that are the biggest support in your system? Let's talk about how you met them and kind of go through the narratives of how those relationships occur. The other biggest thing is working through any trauma that they have in terms of their coming out process. I like to have clients do a coming out timeline. And that's an activity that I do, which is a simple activity of, all right, let's walk through your process of coming out. If they have come out, who have they come out to? What does that look like? And you can also bring back that genogram and talk about how it was for them to come out to different family members and different members in their support system. Right. Let's see what other questions have popped up. All right. So for resources, I am going to resources are being sent to y'all. And the biggest resource that I would say for this area is Pride Link, and they have a phenomenal website. So check out Pride Link. So essentially, from my experience, what is most missing from the therapy experience for queer clients is not needing to educate the therapist on what it's like to be queer. And that it goes for any underrepresented population. And essentially, how therapists can navigate that is to continue to do your research, do your homework, and make sure that you are constantly up on historical events, cultural events. What I've learned as a professor is a lot of the younger generation know nothing about the AIDS epidemic, and so bringing that into the classroom and bringing that into conversation of talking about how the AIDS epidemic really impacted this community, really impacted the culture of the United States. I added a resource to docu-series on my PowerPoint as resources. One is called Pride, and it's put out by FX. It's available on Hulu. Phenomenal resource in terms of walking through each decade, starting in the 60s, I believe, and how the queer community has progressed and really become part of the culture of the United States. Okay. So the other biggest piece is language. And this is where I like to start, of just language is powerful, and in really working through what language you're using can be the biggest step as well. So the easiest thing is pronouns. So the easiest thing you can do now is in your email or on your website or whatever marketing materials you use, place your pronouns and share those freely. Okay. And that's just a way of letting people know that, hey, like, you're being inclusive. Another example I give is I like to say y'all a lot, which is very Southern and very appropriate, but it's inclusive. It's not you guys, or it's not gendering, but very inclusive. And then I use they, them for everyone, even in my personal life, until their pronouns have been shared with me, just to maintain that inclusivity. The biggest thing that's happening right now is we stepped away from using the term preferred. So it used to be, oh, what are your preferred pronouns? And we're stepping away from that because that makes it seem like people have the choice, and it's going back to, oh, you're choosing to be queer, you're choosing to be X, Y, and Z, and that's not the case. So stepping away from the term preferred is where we're headed. And then also, homosexual is also not a term that is being used, and stepping away from that as well. Okay. Any questions about language? And let me review. Um, Kind of review the Q&A. Okay, I answered that. All right. The other thing I'll share, is just this genderbread person.
Dr. Thomas,
Yes.
there was a question in the chat, you may not have seen, but if preferred is not used, what is?
Just pronouns, or what's your, so you just drop the preferred and ask, what are your pronouns? So good question. Or what is your gender expression? What's your, who are you attracted to? Things like that. Thank you, Maggie. So this is a phenomenal, just visual representation that kind of helps break down the different gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, attracted to. Something that I see people get caught up in is, gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation, and make they're very different things. And the best example that I've heard is gender expression, gender identity is who you go to bed as, and sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. Okay, and that kind of helps you break that down. But if you Google gingerbread person, this is just a great, um, visual representation of how to kind of break this down and bring this into the therapy room and allow for clients um, to discuss this and share with you where they're at on the spectrum of each of these levels. Okay. So let me go through some of the Q&A real fast. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because in case people don't want their names being shared.
It actually should say if that it gives them an option to do anonymous versus
Cool.
put their name, so you should be fine. And I've allowed them to, I think I figured out how to allow everyone to see the questions now too, so.
Sweet. So let me go through this first one. Yeah, so the first, Q&A is asking about what to do if a child is against their parents' sexual orientation, and kind of navigating that. And that right there is pretty simple in terms of just holding space for that child to process what it's like to I'm not sure if their mother came out later in life, or if they were born and their mother was, married to a woman, but kind of processing that and what that means. And I would do a timeline of how they came to understand, that their mom was in a same-sex relationship and what that has meant to them and their identity. Okay, so how can therapists better include the queer community, and particularly children? So essentially, just what I would say to this is be inclusive in your therapy room in terms of what artwork you have on in your room or on your website or brochures, and making sure that you don't just have heterosexual or straight couples or all white couples, or just being more inclusive in how you're representing your practice, and connecting with Pride Link and connecting with other resources in the community, like going to a drag show or going to a Pride event. I know Pride, we just finished, June, which is Pride Month, but maintaining that, being involved in the community. I know that there's a hostel in Greenville Modal that does a queer night every Thursday night, and attending these events and just getting acquainted with the community and allowing yourself to be more involved in that. Okay, let's see what other questions. So, big question. Um, how do we break down these barriers in the South, right? And I feel like that is probably going to be my life's work. So, luckily, hopefully, knock on wood, I have a long life to live. But life's work of breaking these down, it's going to be we're going to have a huge cultural shift. One thing that we are doing at Converse that might be helpful for y'all to hear is when we're interviewing potential students, when we're interviewing therapists, they have to sign essentially a contract saying that they will not discriminate against any clients due to any beliefs that are different than their own or any identity that is different from their own, to kind of let them know that this is where we stand as a program and this is what your job is as a therapist, is to be inclusive of everyone and not be able to pick who you support as a client and who you don't. That's at the clinician level. At the cultural level, I think time is what is going to help us break down these barriers and continue conversation. How you communicate with your family members in your personal life, I think, is the biggest way to do this, and just bringing these unique narratives and really sharing um, your experience with the community and breaking down those barriers in your personal life will also help with that. All right, going through these questions. Great questions, y'all. So this question is essentially children 3 to 17 that are still trying to figure out how they want to present themselves. They have experienced trauma and are coming out as queer to caregivers, usually outside of their birth home. Some caregivers have a hard time adjusting. How do you address the underlying trauma as well as the trauma of rejection? Should this be two different things? So, my first thought to this question is I think the caregivers need more training. It seems like this might be caregivers, meaning maybe adoptive parents or foster parents. I think they need more training on how to accept the queer community and how to be more okay with the queer community. I think that's the best answer for that. Yeah, so this is a really great question. So, in getting awareness, I realize more and more about insensitive content, jokes regarding the queer community in everyday life. It's troubling to see. Um, yeah, so this is an ongoing conversation, I think, and just outside of the queer community, but also with the Black community and with the Latinx community and other underrepresented populations. Is there's a lot of stuff embedded in our culture that is very negative toward all of these communities, especially if we think about how we raise boys in terms of, you're not allowed to cry and those kind of narratives. I mean, that we feminine we make it feminine to cry, and that is, connected to the queer community. And so then it's a joke of, oh, you're crying, you're a boy, so you must be gay. So all of these things are kind of built in, and it's understanding that these narratives are harmful and working around them and reworking those narratives in your life. And I think that is very important to continue to do. And my biggest suggestion with this too is, especially if as therapists, to have peers in our field um, that you can really connect with and brainstorm this. I have probably about 10 different people that I connect with on a monthly basis of brainstorming things outside of my personal life, like working with Latinx clients, Black clients, and really working through that to have that peer support so that I'm not working in isolation, because I think that is what is the most harmful to do. So the term queer has replaced homosexual. Yes, for the most part, but homosexual wasn't as inclusive either. So we're just not using that term homosexual at all. Who knows though? In 20 years, it may make a comeback, but in the moment, it is not being used. Yeah. Yeah. So asked to repeat the who you go to bed with verbiage. Yeah. So gender expression is who you go to bed as. So who you present as when you're going to bed. And then your sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. So it's the other partner that you're going to bed with or partners. Yes, and then of course, the Uplift Outreach Center is a phenomenal resource in Spartanburg um, as well, and definitely check them out. Yeah, so resources, support groups for parents, caregivers that are struggling with acceptance but want to be supportive. So yeah, PFLAG. If you look up PFLAG, they have a group. I think last night was the first night that they held an in-person gig after COVID, and that is for parents. So PFLAG stands for Parents and Friends for Lesbian and Gays, and so it's a support group for those who are really working through coming to terms with their kids coming out and really providing support there. Okay, let me make sure. What other questions have come up as I've kind of been answering these questions? And awesome. Thank you, Maggie, for putting the. All right. So, how do you help a couple where one wants to explore polyamory and one views that as cheating? So, I actually have a few couples that I'm working with where one identifies as poly and the other as monogamous. And that is probably one of the trickiest, I think, types of couple cases that I have to work with because of essentially working with both of them to understand each other's perspective and creating strict boundaries and rules for the relationship, right? So if the monogamous couple, the monogamous partner is not okay with their poly partner having interaction with others, then we need to reassess what the relationship is going to look like moving forward. And so I do a lot of work with boundary setting and a lot of attachment work as well. And so, what does it mean? What attachment style do you have, and what does it mean if your partner is poly? How do you work to have a secure attachment in that type of relationship? It's a really good question.
Dr. Thomas,
Yeah.
some on the line may not even be familiar with the term poly. Do you mind just explaining that briefly? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Yeah. So polyamorous essentially means that you are in either a physical or an emotional relationship with more than one person. And just, there are differences in emotional relationships and physical relationships. And so poly just means you have more than one um, partner. And how they define that is I allow them to set that. So they may have just one primary partner and other secondary partners and so forth. So that's a pretty brief, easy explanation of poly.
Thank you.
Yeah. So asking about the contract therapist sign, can they opt out due to religious freedom? They can opt out, but we probably will not. That would be against our ethics as therapists. And so then that as a whole conversation of, as therapists, we're not allowed to discriminate against anyone. And so it becomes an ethical issue for our code of ethics as MFTs, due to AAMFT. So that so the question was, would the contract um, is the ones that we make Converse students sign, are they able to opt out due to religious freedom? And potentially yes, but the bigger, more important for me is the ethics around that, and how it doesn't fit with the ethics of being a therapist. Okay, so another question. It seems like our language choice when it comes to poly mono is important too. Example, couples come to counseling for one partner's infidelity presents very differently than couples coming to counseling for one partner's desire to main. Yeah, and so that good question. So if I think I'm understanding this question right, it's deciphering between infidelity and with couples and where, let me reread this question. So couple comes to counseling for one partner's infidelity presents very differently than couple comes to counseling for one partner's desire to maintain a monogamous relationship. Yes. So languaging there is, if uh, just working with infidelity, it's what did the infidelity represent? Was the infidelity one partner asking for a polyamorous relationship? Was the infidelity the partner wanting a way out of the relationship? So really understanding what that infidelity meant and how they consider infidelity, and if both partners do consider it infidelity, right? It's allowing a conversation and processing that content of what infidelity means. And even in polyamorous relationships, infidelity can still occur if the boundaries that are set in their relationship are broken, right? So one couple that I have, one of their boundaries is there's no fluid swapping allowed between partners with other people outside of their main relationship. And so if that were to occur, then that would be considered infidelity, because that goes against their boundaries and rules and expectations of a relationship. And I think that's the biggest strength of relationships that are polyamorous, is those types of relationships have to include more conversation around expectations and boundaries, which is ideal for all relationships, but that has to be built in further because of the uniqueness of the relationship being polyamorous and the multiple layers of that. Maggie, have I missed any questions in the chat or anything?
I haven't seen any that you've missed, so.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, well, I take that back. Let's see. Ways to help them explore this and feel okay. I'm not knowing. I think it was just more of a comment. So, but working primarily with teens and having a lot that are unsure of their sexual orientation or sexual identity, I'm always looking for ways to help them explore this and feel okay with not knowing for sure. Any thoughts are appreciated.
Yeah, so my biggest advice for this, or just consult with this, is sit with them in that process. Don't push them to, you just walk through them while they explore, and it's okay. It's okay if they wake up one day and they're like, well, I might feel more this way or be more attracted physically to a man today or a woman today. Like, that's okay. That's normal. That is our sexual orientation or sexual identity is constantly fluid, and I think we need to normalize that more. And as soon as we ask people to put themselves or maintain themselves into a box of being this or that, is where I think that's where it gets problematic. And that's why I like the term queer, because it's just so inclusive in terms of allowing people to, like, if you say you're queer, that can mean 1,000 different things, and that's powerful to have that that ability for that to be part of your narrative. Hope that's helpful. Sweet. I don't see.
There was a question about just how to navigate conversations with a queer client and their family members who are not supportive.
Mm, yeah. So it's holding space. And honestly, as a marriage and family therapist, what I would do with that is if the client is comfortable, I would ask them to invite their family to session and provide that space for them to continue to navigate those conversations and navigate those in a more um, maybe safe space, and just provide support, right? Allow them to role play, allow them to do an empty chair activity where one of their family members who they're most nervous talking with is in that chair, and have them talk to them in therapy, and really um, provide that type of support and space for those conversations.
There's one last question. It was one of the first I just noticed. I apologize, but what to do about barriers in our school settings? That's a pretty big question.
Yeah,
Not,
that
not
if I had the answer to that, you know, what was it, 2019 or yeah, it's 2019 that it finally became okay for public schools to discuss same-sex content in them, and so I mean, to me, that's just wild that it took that long for that to be okay and not against the law to do, and so I mean, the barriers I in a perfect world, and this is outside of our scope, but providing more training and more support to faculty and staff in school settings, and allow for them to continue to learn in that way. And if you're a therapist in a school, providing support groups for the faculty and for the administrative staff, and allow them to do something like we're doing today of asking these questions, and being able to brainstorm together and work together to create solutions. Yeah, phenomenal question. I think did we how can we best empower our clients within this community? So I think the biggest way to empower this community as a therapist is to just be present with them, right? You have to think that in their daily life, they are probably interacting with people who say their beliefs or they disagree with who they are as a person. And as therapists, we can just provide space and really allow them to be who they are and cheer them on as they navigate this, right? It's you know just highlight the success that they have had navigating their identity and really coming to terms with who they are and really accepting them, and really just being there, that support system um, during that. And I think is the most empowering thing we can do. And that's with all clients. That's not just specific to this community. Any other questions? The biggest thing that I would advise y'all to do is, continue to connect with other therapists who maybe have more experience in working with this population, and really brainstorm with them. Go to a P flag meeting yourself or go to any event and really become more exposed to the community. I think that's the best way that us as therapists can provide support, is to really become more and more familiar with the community itself. I do think this is more controversial, but sometimes I do think it's better to refer out if you don't feel comfortable with a client who identifies as queer or as trans. Refer out um, if you can, because they probably experienced a lot of trauma and people not being able to, and a lot of trauma in relationships due to their identity. And as therapists, we don't want to heighten that or bring more of that trauma into their life. So if you can refer out, Psychology Today now has the ability for therapists to put their own identity on their profile, and so if you search gay therapist in Greenville, my profile should pull up. So there are progress. There is progress being made in that realm as well. Any other questions or anything that I haven't touched base on that y'all think would be important to have a conversation about? Maggie, anything else from your experience in hosting these that you think I should touch base on or cover?
I think that you've covered so much, and I think people are sort of taking things in
Mhm,
right now. I'm getting messages in the chat about, thanking for all the resources. I think
mhm,
that's a lot of what people are
yeah,
needing is to sort of, I
mhm,
mean, I think that probably on the call today, I'm guessing we have a wide variety of folks
mhm,
who are, at different places with learning all this
mhm,
information. So I'm sure that other questions will come up. I did put your email in the chat early on, and I can do that again so that folks who have questions beyond today can contact you.
mhm. That's phenomenal. Yeah, please feel free to reach out to me, shoot me a email for contacting me. And I will say the biggest thing too is, if you're working with a client in this population and they correct you, just be okay with that. Be okay with that growth area. And what I've learned to do in just my own experiences of working with uh, different types of clients is, not trying to justify why I said something or did something, um, but just saying thank you. I appreciate that. I hear that, and I will do research on my own to make sure that I create change and growth in that area. I think is the best way to approach any mistakes that might happen in language or in any other um, ways. Yeah. So, I mean, if y'all are good, I'm good in terms of allowing people to really look through those resources and um, soak it up and contact me later if questions arise as they're looking through resources.
You were able to get through all the slides. I was so focused
Mhm.
on the questions, I didn't get to see everything, but you were able to get
Yeah.
through everything. Okay. All right. I'm
Cool.
just going to post the resources document one more time so that everybody can have a chance to download that. Um, sorry, that was my dog. All right, so there's the document, and there's Dr. Thomas's email address. Please, feel free to send him questions. You can also email info@mhaspartanburg.org, which is the email address that I check for MHA, and I'll be glad to compile those questions too and send them to Dr. Thomas. So we thank you so much for being with us today. Oh, it looks like there might be a couple more questions actually in the Q&A. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like um, two questions that I can kind of answer. So, Uplift Outreach Center is just a safe space in, if I'm not mistaken, downtown Spartanburg. We've had them come connect with Emerge. Emerge Family Therapy Center is where the Converse students see clients, and I will say that um, emerge is affirming and a safe space as well for clients to be referred to, and we are a sliding fee scale. But Uplift Outreach Center is a safe space for the core community to hang out, receive resources, and it looks like it's currently virtual right now. So, and I would suggest just checking out their website, and that would provide you with the most up-to-date information as well. The other question is, what if a child identifies as gay, but the support system in his community seem to be more transgender focused? And so my suggestion for that is connecting with that child and ask them what's been positive about those resources and what are maybe some gaps or things that they would like more support on, and try to fill those gaps and work with them to find maybe a more gay focused or queer focused support system that they can support group that they can attend to. Awesome. And thank you, Deb, for providing information about Uplift. All right. So I think that is all the questions that I see. Maggie, anything that I missed?
No, I don't see any. Oh, let's see.
So what was a hostel? It's called Modal, MODAL. They have Instagram, and I'll put that in the chat.
Awesome. Well, and I'm sure that there probably are other questions that may be coming to people now, or they're not sure exactly how to ask or how to word. So feel free to send emails to either myself or Thomas, and we'll try to get those questions answered beyond today. Please, if you are interested in getting continuing education for today, just look for your email post session. It should be probably tomorrow or Monday at the latest, and all that information will be in there about how to access the continuing education credit. So thank you so much, Dr. Thomas. This has been great. It doesn't look like, I don't see any more questions right now. So let me just make sure I'm not missing anything else, but I think you've covered a lot today, and it is a big topic, and I think we might just need to have you come back again and do another lunch and learn for us in the future, and maybe update. There probably will be updates on this information as well. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, y'all. And feel free to email me with questions that continue to come up for you.
Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Bye-bye.